At Orca, we believe the most enduring spaces speak in a language older than words written in wood, stone, and the architecture of nature. Unearthing is our exploration of this vocabulary through conversations that bridge the elemental and the intentional. In each episode, we have a dialogue between design and the natural world. We'll dig into different methodologies of construction and materiality, sharing our best practices and philosophies, while learning from experts who approach their craft as a collaboration with nature itself. Join us as we uncover how these raw elements can become both teachers and tools, creating environments that heal, inspire, and reconnect us to our natural rhythms. Bonnie Wright is an actress, filmmaker, and environmental activist. Bonnie sheds light on the relationship of water to land, how we can have impact on a local level, and the importance of nature-based play. Here's our conversation. Bonnie, I always like to start this conversation just kind of back to the beginning, and I'd love to hear from you what your earliest memory is of being in a garden.
I think my earliest memory is a very urban version of a garden where I grew up in the center of London in a very urban area. We had sort of a rooftop garden. So my understanding of a garden was everything in plant pots and, smaller scale things, but it definitely was still a super important space for us and it was easy to access. And then I think I've realized as I've got older, in London, you are actually incredibly blessed with the amount of green spaces you have in a city like London. There's vast open spaces you can still get to and not see any like tall buildings. So you could definitely feel that sense of getting like lost in a garden or in a park when I was younger. And I think too, some of the spaces that I played in as a kid, they were very old parks. When you have a city as old as London, there was that feeling of feeling small in a good way and having those big, trees that really felt kind of very steady and just like the perfect play zone.
And could you tell us a little bit about the big tree that occupies your current home and garden and where that might be?
Yeah, so we live amongst quite a few coast live oak trees. One is particularly massive. It's about, I don't know, maybe 50 feet tall. I'm looking at it right now. And it actually grows like through our living room. So obviously it was here before the house was built. I mean, arborists sort of, guesstimate like 250-year-old tree. So it's kind of amazing. We always think about like the people that were coming through here and maybe living off this tree, same as the animals are now. Maybe they were harvesting the acorns, and it feels really beautiful to feel like this tree has really seen a lot of things, let alone the home being built around it and the conversations it's heard in the living room, I always think about. And yeah, it creates this whole canopy over our home that is kind of amazing in the summer because it's this beautiful shade, which is obviously unusual in a hot climate. So we kind of got our own cooling system. But yeah, it's kind of that weird thing where every so often you kind of have to pinch yourself and remind yourself there's a tree growing in your living room. You just sat on the couch like, oh, there's a tree right there and I can just go hug it if I want. And when you open the front door, it's like right there in your face. So for people when they come for the first time to our home, it's like, oh, whoa, like it's quite like confronting and like something for your mind to kind of figure out.
It seems like it's the backbone of the home and almost like it grew the house itself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously it's grown in the time the home was built in like the late 40s, early 50s. So yeah, it's definitely had to like the holes, there's 5 points that it goes out through the ceiling. So those points have had to like be expanded over time. But I think it's probably done most of its growing. The home is probably somewhat kind of keeping it how it is. But yeah, it's sort of, it comes with responsibility for sure. You really have to want to love and look after the tree and keep it healthy. Otherwise the whole home kind of could go down with it. And I kind of think that's probably how we should live anyway. Like if we're not necessarily as dependent as this home is on the tree, we should also kind of have that same idea with like the plants that we share our space with, that like their health is very, very connected to ours. So that's been a thing, just to like get to know it, really. It's been like get to know how to care for it with the help of people who have a deeper knowledge. But it's been really interesting to take on that responsibility to look after it.
It's nice to think about settling and building in a way that's not so permanent that it can't grow with nature as it grows, and just building a home that has flexibility to it. Even those 5 points being able to expand and taking cues from the tree and how the home needs to react.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the family that built it, he was like an engineer and a carpenter, and obviously it was his like vision to decide to do this, which I'm sure many people even then thought like, what are you doing? So I kind of like that he had this real vision for his family home, with him and his 5 children, and they had this really cool vision. And I'm pleased that not much has changed in the house too. Like, it's all his original carpentry of the cupboards and doors, and so yeah, it feels really special to like live that on. And they were kind of a known family in our neighborhood. Like, I've met people who grew up here, and multiple generations like used to come to this home, and it's sort of a known space. So it feels great to be able to keep that going and not have some crazy vision to want to change anything. We don't have like some wild idea to change the home.
Could you share with us your journey to client activism?
Yeah, sure. I think just being a human being, being one that loves to be here, loves to enjoy all the beautiful spaces and landscapes that I've, spent my life enjoying, and realizing the kind of potential threat that those spaces face, and how can I give back so that those places and spaces can be here for forever. My space that kind of brought me in really was the coast. I've always loved the water and the ocean, and the coast that I spent a lot of time on as a child on the south coast of England was really already beginning to see the effects of, pollution, of erosion. And from sort of a teenager, I was like, why is this happening? And became very interested in sort of like water systems, land to ocean, land to river connection, and sort of really trying to understand like where this was all coming from. And then I started working with Greenpeace, particularly on their sort of oceans campaign. And I think the one moment that sort of clicked in for me is I went on a journey with them on one of their ships. We were on the Atlantic coast here of the US, and just experiencing the, campaigners and the people on the ship who just like live and breathe this commitment to the earth. I was just totally inspired by their just absolute drive, and was, left that trip on the ship just being like, I need to do this I need to weave this into everything I'm doing all the time, and bring this message back to, the platform that I had the privilege to be able to talk, on. So to me, it was important to, and not because I felt like I needed to, but just because I felt like I wanted to. And I felt very, very passionate about bringing these stories that can often feel very out of sight, out of mind. Like, the microplastics in our ocean that can feel quite hard, I think, to bring home. I think now we are a bit more understanding it, but this was about 8-9 years ago, when maybe it wasn't such a kind of everyday conversation. So yeah, it became really important for me to see how I could empower people to think, yes, I can make a difference, and the choices I make in my day-to-day life do make a difference. And I do have the power to call people out, whether that's, corporations, governments, and really like seek transparency behind the things that we do and buy, and how we relate to each other. And I think like anyone who goes into any environmental work, whilst you may have that way in, like it was for me, the water and the ocean, the minute you look under one thing, it's like the whole Pandora's box opens, and you're like, oh my gosh, everything is connected.
Can you speak more about kind of the land to water connection?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we think the ocean is this far off place that, what we do, miles and miles inland doesn't affect it. But really, deeply feeling that interconnectedness of everything, I think is a wonderful way to really just think about how water flows and moves, coming from the sky or coming from, underground. It's moving through and across the earth. And obviously, when you think about urban spaces, it's having to kind of roll over quite a lot of things, often, toxins, things that we're putting out on our gardens. things that we're not picking up on the side of the street. And if you're, somewhere like here in the county of Los Angeles, our storm drains go straight out into the ocean. So anything that goes down into the gutter of the sidewalk and the street, that is going straight to the health of our bay here. And that is obviously highly linked to our health too. So I think it's just really feeling that sense of connectedness. You don't have to be just right on the coast, like dropping a piece of trash on the beach. It can go much deeper inland. All the pressure should not be put, I think, on the individual in your personal garden, but it's also, agriculture, which is such a massive, massive business that, there have been many, many people doing great things and showing the ways that you can scale much, much cleaner farming practices and still yield all the same things you want to yield, and often sometimes actually in a more affordable way. It's just kind of getting people there. And obviously, in California, we grow so much food, and obviously water and our lack of is a big issue. So I think for many people, it's always getting that balance of like, okay, I don't know, walking my dog. If I don't pick up after my dog, that is going out into the storm drain. Or is there an alternative to spraying kind of the super toxic, weed killers on your land? Or, around here, things that kind of run into the system is like rat poison and animal poison and things like that. So yeah, it's just really understanding that connection, I think, and knowing that also on a municipality level, I think you can remember that a lot of big change can happen on that scale. That's something that I'm trying to work on with some local organizations here, how to push our Hyperion water treatment plant to do better, basically, because it hasn't really upgraded its cleaning process for, a few decades. For example, one thing that's been happening, I think we're on the tail end right now, but there's been the algal bloom that's been happening, in fact, all down Southern California coast, which is something that was happening already, but it's the toxins entering our ocean that is kind of the worst sort of cocktail for it to sort of keep coming back. So it's not that it's not there, but it's the fact that these toxins in our water that we're allowing to go into our water kind of literally are its perfect food to feed it. And then that goes into the food chain through the fishes and up to the mammals. And it's the mammals that are really being deeply affected. And this year, not only sea lions and stuff, but really dolphins and whales as well. So that's just one example of why we shouldn't be putting so many toxic things into our water system. So that's just being more aware.
Something that's really important for us is understanding and helping our customers and our projects remember that everything that we put into the ground lives in the ground and eventually returns back to the watershed system. So it's really just remembering that with every sealant, any chemicals used in construction, anything used in herbicides is a great example as well. But all of that, it exists forever in some way. It doesn't just evaporate, because that too then comes back down into our soils. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, when you look at the large scale of that is landfills, obviously, which are kind of terrifying to visit. And, whilst they'll say, oh, we are sealing it and we've got all these, different valves that are off-gassing different things, you're like, it is going into our earth slowly but surely. It is. Yeah. And I think people recently, maybe with all the debris cleanup that's happening with the fires here we've just had, people, I think, are becoming even more aware of that, because a lot of this debris is going to landfills that are actually not prepped for this hazardous kind of material. So we're actually kind of going against the rules that have been laid down. But, there hasn't been another alternative that people have kind of thought to do. So it's kind of this hard difficulty of yes, it has to rest somewhere, sadly, that kind of debris. But what is the best way to do that? I don't think there's a clean and clear answer. But I think it's worrying when you have landfills that, internally are literally on fire and, off-gassing different things in Southern California. I think when you are, doing a new build or doing something, you hope to build something to last forever. But if it doesn't, and the next person needs to change something in that home, you need to be from the beginning of building more aware of what you're going to use and what is the resting place of that piece. I think that life cycle of products we just don't do. It's the magic trash bin that you never see it again.
Exactly.
We wash our hands of it.
Yeah, the afterlife of building materials is really a mystery to most folks.
And repurposing, I think. Like we just redid the whole patio outside our house and it was really broken up because of the tree. Like these bits of cement had just kind of uprooted because of the roots of the tree. But then we built this whole pathway like up a hill and we reused all that concrete that we broke up. And now we use that all for the steps going up to our hill that we made kind of new. So it's like, how and where can you actually keep that stuff on your land and reuse it, repurpose it? You know, there's obviously so many different platforms where you can share things, you know, for free, like just thinking maybe someone else wants this before you think to go pay so much for a dump fee, you know, actually thinking maybe someone else could use this.
It kind of leads me to my next question that I'm really excited about that you're focused on, and that's the term of localism and how to keep things within kind of this like tighter radius, I think is how I interpret it. Could you share a little bit about what localism means to you and ways that you're actively engaging in your community?
Yeah, I think for so many of us all the time, we're being faced with serious global issues, threats against, you know, human rights, so many things all the time. And it can feel totally overwhelming and, you know, it can make us incredibly angry, understandably. And it's good to feel, I think, that those rages on the global sense. But sometimes to actually move forward and find a pathway, I have definitely found most people look to their local community as a way to sort of like channel that energy and actually feel some sense of shift, change, and community. And I think if we all just deepen our local relationships with human beings, with plants, with, you know, businesses, with our food sources, then slowly that will ripple out on a global scale. I really do think that people are really believing that and living that truth. I think there have been moments like even during COVID, just like the supply chain breaking down of like things, and people, you know, including myself, sometimes probably didn't even think the complexity of the supply chain, that one, you know, a few things and it can fall. And actually you're relying on too many stages for things to get to you. So how can you kind of shorten that supply chain is a massive way to make a positive impact because of all those miles that something needed to travel to you, and supporting your local economy. I think here, you know, post fires, and we also had another road closure last year, a lot of people really tried to keep the businesses going so they wouldn't disappear. Otherwise the town wouldn't be as great as it would be, you know. So I think a lot of people are sort of realizing that, shop locally, you know, shop within your state or your country. I think it's an excellent way to deepen your relationship to the land and the seasons as well. I think a great way to really limit that is to eat seasonally. Like I am personally not in a belief to prescribe any type of eat this, don't eat this personality. I'm more like seasonal is the most important thing and you choose the rest. I don't think everything fits everyone. And I think people are beginning to understand that. And to me, yeah, it's been really special to invest in this community more in my time and my energy, and having a child that changes things too, I think, because you like, you know, you want your kid to play with other kids and then you meet this web of different people.
It's interesting to think about with a global supply chain. I think COVID's a really great example of where that really kind of shed light on our dependency on materials outside of our local access. But when we open up our dependency on this like broader supply chain, we lose connection with the person that's actually making the thing that we're in need of, like whether that's food or materials or any commodity. It does seem like once we start to rely on those demands of access, we lose access to the actual person, which I think is the real beauty of localism, is that then there is a dependency on the actual person versus the like supply chain working correctly.
Yeah, and I think going back to like the maker, creator, whoever, the farmer, I think a lot of those things we've come out of an era of people needing to try do loads and loads of things and not very well, rather than actually honing a craft and actually being really respected to be a great farmer. And even specifically maybe just fruit, like you don't to like spread your crops across things. Or I mean, for me, my parents are both jewelry designers and makers, and they sit at their bench and they are really, really good at working with metal, and they have a deep relationship to that material. And I grew up with that understanding of like honing your craft and being really good at that. And to them, like the supply chain is really important to them, and keeping everything within London, if not England, is really important to them. And then for me, my first experience working was on a set that literally had the people at the top of their game, you know, like the best production designer, the best costume designer, all these things. And all of them were incredibly humble and amazing at what they did. And again, just strengthened that belief that we can, like, it's a practice being good at something. And I think people will like respect you for that and want to come to you because you have the knowledge. Like, I don't need to learn about doing one thing. I can just go to someone who has that knowledge instead, because that's their thing. And I think when you bring people in, like for you to envision a space, like they are coming to you because they respect like the time and energy and your craft, which I think is a really special thing. And often I'm sure most people like are going to learn something through the experience of working with you. And that's what I love. When I get to work with people, like something of their practice rubs off on me. It doesn't mean I want to like now become them, but I kind of feel like I've kind of had a little window into their craft.
The big part of our work, Bonnie, is increasing permeability in landscapes, just because there's such a desire and default to creating non-permeable surfaces, asphalt, concrete, etc. And one of our goals is to educate people about the importance of soil as a filter and allowing the earth to breathe and water to return to it and create a more of a cleansing cycle of water versus controlling the flow of water. In terms of like how we design and how people build spaces, how does permeability impact the ocean and kind of this whole like returning to ocean? And maybe if there's like any feelings that arise when I speak about like concrete and asphalt and like hard surfaces in urban environments, how people can like rethink space.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to the ocean and like storm drains, I find it really, really frustrating when you're walking down the street or you're driving and you just see someone's like irrigation and water just like flowing. And you're like, you literally are turning that on and it's none of it is going. Like you are literally wasting water and it's going to go onto the street and it's either going to dry up from the sun or it's just going to go into the storm drain. So it's like just... if people were there more watching the flow of their water, like someone could set some system and then, I don't know, they're at work or they're not there when it's actually happening. So they're actually not witnessing the flow of water. And I think that goes to, you know, that classic story of like, if you move into a space to actually be with it and witness it for a minute before you start changing things, because you need to like know it better, whether that's knowing where the sun is or different things. So I think that really frustrates me when I just see water just flowing down the street when, you know, water is not, you know, free. And then, yeah, to me, when I think about also just like concrete, you know, I think about children again in schools. And, you know, there are so many children who literally just have asphalt as their play space. And in a hot place, it's just baking hot. You're not giving any shade to, you know, you're not giving any respite to those children to just exist under trees. And, you know, we know that it brings down the temperature drastically the minute you start, you know, planting. And I think luckily there has been a real understanding and shift of that in, you know, across all styles of schools. So that's great. So I think like, how can we help public places like that transition to those spaces and like enrich children's lives to not exist on concrete in their kind of playtime? Growing up somewhere where like rain and water was just something you just like played in water and splashed it around, there was this abundance more because of the climate that I grew up in. And so my relationship to water and capturing it and savoring it has definitely become much more important, and living here and seeing the connection of land to ocean. So yeah, I think really thinking about the materials you're using and how you can allow sort of like the relationship of what you may need for ease, of walking over, I don't know, or parking your car or something. People are like, oh, I just need it to be, easy, wash it down. It's like, well, that's not actually great. So like you've said, it's an educational piece, and it's just like the easiest visual to me is like, okay, imagine the earth had to like breathe or like come up for air. Like, how do you create those spaces to allow it to come up for air and for goodness to go back in?
Could you share with us some of your daily rituals that connect you to nature?
So often go for a walk with our dogs and our son just on our land or on nearby land. And I feel like it's always different if I'm walking with him or if I'm walking on my own. I think both are good. I think sometimes I'm more just like staring off into the distance when I'm on my own, just like pondering the scale of this space and this land. And then when I'm with him, it's all about the details. He's the detail, like, picking things up and looking at this bug and picking this, plant. So it's kind of interesting how like he pulls me back down to that kind of detail space where I often have like, I'm more of a like horizon starer maybe in my own personal way. So yeah, just that morning walk and ritual is important.
We always talk a lot about just nature-based play and how we can help encourage that in urban landscape designs. And I really love hearing the story about your son and how he's all about the details. Because to me, that's just like the curiosity and that like that juicy wonder that happens in kids, and how to encourage gardens and environments that allow them to zoom in and see all of those details.
Yeah, and I think at different ages, like for him, he's like organizing the world basically in his brain right now. Like what's something I play with or it's on my plane, and what's something that maybe I don't touch, or that's that, So I think it's like interesting that for him, I think he is incredibly a sensory person and seeks that sensory touch and feeling, like unless he hasn't kind of understood it unless he's sort of picked it up and touched it. So that's kind of fun to think that we are able to give him all those different textures being in this landscape than he would if he was maybe in a more urban space. You'd have to kind of create that for him, like inside where he like has a sensory, outdoor space. So that feels really exciting to give him. And he just wants to be outside. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure in design in those spaces, like what becomes like more of an open blank canvas for them to create, and then what spaces are more like, rooted in space. And it's like, I think I'm pretty sure I'm right, but there's some statistic where it's like 1 in 5 children have never climbed a tree. And I was like, wow, okay, we need to get that statistic up. How do we get that up?
Bonnie, thank you so much for your time today. It was really wonderful having you on Unearthing.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to be in conversation with you.